One of the things I would say, actually, and this is maybe a little bit of controversial advice, is I would say the first thing you should do as somebody who's been laid off is not just all of a sudden go and apply to jobs.
Welcome to the Strategic Thinkers podcast. I know I say this a lot, but I am excited to be able to have this guest on this week because it's timing wise, it's a really great thing. Every time I talk to Abby, she has something new that she's working on. She is a fascinating person, and I know that there are a lot of people out here struggling right now trying to figure out their careers and what they're going to do next. And I couldn't imagine a better person that can step in and be able to help provide some insights and guidance. So I want to thank you for being a guest on and welcome you, Abby, and give you a chance to be able to tell people a bit about yourself.
Well, thanks so much, Sean. I feel like I can't even follow an introduction like that because you truly have a voice for radio. You have a face for radio too.
I
But your
appreciate
voice,
that.
I'm just like, how can I lower my vocal register like 5 points just to approximate what you're able to deliver there? I feel like, yeah, how could I follow that? But thank you so much for the generous introduction as well.
No problem. It's funny. When I was a kid, I always wanted to be a radio DJ. I used to love it. And I said, at some point, I will do voiceovers or something like that. But I am such a behind the scenes person that I never really followed through on it. But this is my opportunity to be able to bring it full circle. So I'm excited about that part. Well, let's dive into it because I'm going to be mindful of your time. One of the things that we've discussed was portfolio careers. It's something that I find fascinating. It's something that I've done over the years, but I didn't really have a name for it until we had a conversation and I realized, okay, not only does it make sense, but it's also something that I think is really relevant right now. And I would love for you to be able to give people an idea of what a portfolio career is and what led you to look into it.
Yeah, completely. Because that's kind of a little bit of how I got into it. I kind of got into it unknowingly. It wasn't something that I set out intentionally to pursue. So a little bit of context around my background and how I got into this way of working. I actually am a co-founder in a tech company. And prior to building a tech company with my co-founder that I have now, I had worked exclusively at corporate jobs. A lot of them were at startups, like early stage startups. I did do a brief stint at Facebook, a 3-year stint at Facebook. But yeah, whether the companies were Fortune 100 companies or 0 to 1 small startup companies, I was gainfully employed at them. I was an employed member of those companies and, just used to getting a steady paycheck every month, used to having a company pay for my benefits and not really second guessing, should I reassess my ability to generate wealth for myself outside of these companies? And I think a big thing that was really transformative in the way that I looked at work was around 2022, which was when I was actually laid off from Facebook. So I was of the first. I know Facebook has done subsequent a number of layoffs, but I was actually in the first round of layoffs that Facebook did publicly in 2022, November of that year. And I did not see it coming. I know a day or two before there was the rumor mill that had started and there was the Wall Street Journal article that came out saying that they suspected Meta was going to cut some of its workforce. But I figured my performance ratings had been so stellar. I had recently made moves within the organization, moved up within the organization. Nobody ever, at the time, nobody really thought this would happen to me. And I had a previous history of working at startups where layoffs were all the more common because those companies were bootstrapped. They had limited runway. So I figured, I'm working at a publicly traded company now. What are the odds that they're going to need to let go of my salary? But actually what ended up happening was my entire team was let go as a result of those layoffs. And our global VP ultimately ended up exiting the company as well. So it was not, it was not anything anyone could see coming. And when that layoff happened, I was incredibly, incredibly privileged to be in the place where I got a very generous severance package. And I know that that's not necessarily the case of a lot of folks who are undergoing layoffs today, but I had a big safety net when I was laid off. Financially, I was still operating from a place of abundance, of safety, but in terms of how I felt, I did not feel safe. I think one of the things that we don't talk about enough is when you get laid off, and I try to be pretty outspoken about this now, when you get laid off, it literally changes your life. It'll change the way you look at work for the rest of your life. And I have people in my life that have been laid off, and I have people in my life who have never been laid off. And the way that they think and talk about work is very different. And while I don't wish this on anybody, those of us that have gone through and weathered the uncertainty of, a tenuous relationship with work and not knowing whether you're going to wake up and have a job the next morning, you just start to think differently about how can I build some resilience, right? How can I build some certainty in the wake of uncertainty that is this job climate? So I will say, after I got laid off from Facebook, I did go work at another startup pretty quickly thereafter. But even while I was working at that startup, when I started to get contacted about things like consulting opportunities from some of these expert talent networks, whereas previously I would have said no, I started to say yes, because I figured, what's the harm, right? In making myself really valuable and continuing to kind of find ways to accrue value outside of just my corporate 9 to 5. And I just always liked having that little secondary source of income on the side. Fast forward to a year or two later, I actually ended up leaving that startup and starting a new company with my co-founder now. And what nobody tells you, if you haven't worked in a 0 to 1 company before or as a founder, is that you don't get into startups for the money. And Sean, you and I have joked about this too. A lot of people think, oh, you get into startups early so you can make a lot of money. Well, maybe that might be on the other side of the table after, in the early days, a lot of times you're not making any money, you're pre-revenue. And then when you are making money, you're reinvesting all of that revenue into the business. So the ability to be able to materially pay yourself as a startup founder usually comes at least a year, 2 year. I know founders haven't paid themselves for 5-6 years. And of course, they have a lot of equity in the company, but what you're foregoing in that time is a steady paycheck, right?
Yeah.
And in that time, in the first year of my startup, that's when I actually started doing more freelancing work on the side. Because, me and my husband, we wanted to be able to afford a certain standard of living, which is not crazy high, but we just wanted to make sure we were having our basic needs met. We could, have an apartment. I have a chronic disease. I have very expensive copays on medications. And I said to myself, I can't wait 5 years for a paycheck. So while we were building this startup on the side, I started looking into freelancing opportunities. And that's kind of how I started to dip my toes into the waters of freelancing.
Very nice. A lot to unpack there. History is coming back to me. I'm thinking about all of the experiences that I've had over the years, and you've touched on several versions of it. I remember being younger. We talked about the record label days. I remember there was a woman that worked at Atlantic Records. I would see her for stretches. She sat right outside the receptionist's office. So as soon as you came through the door on the 3rd floor, you would see her. And I used to always say hi to her. And then there were some times where I didn't see her, and basically like a month went by. And then I saw her again. I'm like, oh my God, she must have got fired or something happened. And then I saw her again and she said, oh no, I'm a consultant. And I said, what is, like, I don't understand, because it was always something where you were supposed to go into a job, and back in those days, you got in a job and you stayed in that job. But what she had figured out was she was empowering herself. And that was where she explained to me, she said, well, I like to be a consultant because I can come and go as I need to. I negotiate what I need to be able to have in place, but this gives me more of the power, and it allows me to be able to take that month off that she took.
Yeah.
And from that point, I noticed that, okay, that sounds like something that's interesting. And then when I wanted to figure out what career outside of the record label I wanted to be able to do, one of the ways that I was able to identify, is it going to be financial? Is it going to be this? Is it going to be that? Was doing consulting work. And in doing the consulting work, I was able to identify what I liked, what I didn't like, what I was good at, what I wasn't good at. And it opened up the door for me to be able to learn more different trades. So I could go into some place and they say, well, you're going to be there for a month. And then I could end up being there 6 months, because I was able to adjust to what they had in place and what their needs were. I'm saying this to say that there are a lot of people that have been in jobs forever or for a longer period, and now they're in an experience where a lot of people are getting laid off. I just saw a post today where they're saying SaaS is starting to lay a lot of people off, and they're seeing the increase where they're saying, well, on the other side of the pandemic, now we're starting to see people start to pull back and scale back. So there are a lot of people that are out here trying to figure things out in their next step, and they're thinking they have to go right back into the same type of situation. If you've ever been laid off, and I've actually got laid off from a job once where I want to say it was less than 6 months after getting a promotion, and I exceeded my sales and everything. So like you said, I got blindsided. And the reality is, and we can just keep it 100, when you get walked into that office, there's nothing you can say that's going to be able to have them walk that back.
Yeah.
And once you have that realization, then your next step has to be, what is my next step? So I love that you've created something and built something out where you're talking about this and you're giving people ways to be able to address it, because we talked about it before the podcast. I just recently had someone reach out to me over the weekend where they were saying, you seem like an encouraging person. It was someone that had seen my response on LinkedIn to different comments and things. And she was telling me what her struggles were. And as an engineer, she's saying, well, it's really hard for me to be able to find another job. It's something where you can submit, but there aren't a lot of jobs out there. One of the things that I told her is most of the jobs that are happening are things that aren't getting posted. And you had mentioned the same thing. It is a networking environment now. It is something where you need to be able to know someone. And she had mentioned someone said that they would introduce her to someone and then they didn't get back. So it's something where if you've never been in that experience before, it is extremely overwhelming. I say all that to say, this is one of the reasons why I really thought the timing of this was great, because there's so many people going through it and there's so much value that you can add to it. I know my experiences, but my experiences are mine. I love hearing someone else's. So you've described what led up to it. But now let's talk about some of the preventative measures that you were able to put in place. You started to identify that you can work with different companies. Is there some kind of language or anything that you put in place to let them know, like, listen, I'm going to split my time a bit. Can you walk me through how that works and what it looks like?
Yeah. Before I do, I just want to touch on one thing you said earlier, which was there was nothing you could have said when you got in that room with HR to walk back their decision to lay you off. And I think I would like to challenge that a little bit and say,
Okay.
there's nothing you could have said throughout the entire tenure of your employment at that company that could have prevented you from being laid off. I think that's one of the biggest fallacies that a lot of folks, and again, I think this is where sometimes I see a little bit of the divide between folks who have and haven't been laid off. You have no control. And the same is true when you have freelancing clients. You actually have no control as to whether or not that freelancing client is going to renew your contract or fire you next month. But the same is true of a corporate job. You have no control. You can be a top performer. The same was true of me. I was a top performer. I had recently gotten a new role within Facebook that I had secured. And it was definitely like an increase in terms of scope. And it has nothing to do with performance in most cases. And I think because of that reason, because you are giving up so much agency if you only have one corporate job, the best way you can take back agency is by starting to build a portfolio career. And like, I like to think of my career as, not being tied to one specific thing. Like my career is literally the culmination of all of these different things that I have. And I it's become a running joke now. When people ask me what I do, I just say, I'm the lady with 9 jobs. Truly, I just collect jobs. And, I'll get into the how in just a bit. But I think me doing that makes me feel very much in control over my entire career. Because while I can't control any one facet of my career, I can control like that umbrella of like how many clients I'm going to work with, how much business development am I going to continue to do while working with my existing clients to ensure that I have a pipeline of new clients should one of them churn. Things like that. It's just a great way to take back some of that agency. So that's a lot of what I learned from my layoff experience. And I think to your point, yes, there's so many folks who are going through layoffs right now and they're not able to secure full-time employment. So in order to bridge the gap between their previous full-time role and their next full-time role, they're taking on consulting work. They're looking to get into freelancing, but they don't know how to get into it. So I love sharing my story here too, because it's not super glamorous. And I'm not going to be the person that's going to sit here and tell you, you need to set up an LLC right away. You need to invest money in a lawyer and a coach and build this crazy infrastructure to build your business first. Because how I got started first was just as a sole proprietor. So it's very easy to register as a sole proprietor in your state. It's something you do directly, with the IRS. And I had a tax accountant that I worked with to help guide me in that direction. But, once you have your IEN number or EIN number, again, the nomenclature, it's still like, I'm not like a true expert, because the thing that I was an expert in first was like, I knew that I could deliver value to clients. And then once I was able to drive proof of concept that I could deliver value to clients as like a free agent, that's when some of this stuff followed, where I started to build out more of that infrastructure of being a business owner. So that would be my recommendation to folks is rather than getting overwhelmed or bogged down with the details of, oh, I need a website, I need an LLC. Let's make sure that you can appeal to clients and that there's a very clear value exchange between what you can offer and what they need. And then from there, you can start to build out some of these more robust systems. I think the number one question I get is, okay, if I don't have a website, how do I get clients? I think there's a couple ways. The ways that I did it, and I know that this is there's kind of two thoughts on this matter, but I like freelancing platforms, especially as you're just starting, as you're someone who's just trying to start to get your bearings on it. I got my first clients on Upwork, which is a freelancing platform. Yep, it's free to use. I will caution, like, it is very saturated. There is a lot of talent on platforms like Upwork. Fiverr, I never did Fiverr, but that's a similar one. I know as well there's like freelancer.com, there's actually a really good one, Pangea.com. That's one that's been released in the United States. That's a really good one. And what these platforms basically do is it's a marketplace, right? So there's a bunch of freelancers that sign up, they create profiles on these websites, and then there's a bunch of brands or companies that are looking for freelance talent. And they'll go and they'll post job postings. And then you basically, as a freelancer, sometimes you're invited to apply to those jobs. Other times you proactively reach out to companies when you see an opening. And all of the kind of matchmaking and interview facilitation, a lot of that happens on the platforms. For certain platforms, you also get paid through the platforms. And those platforms will often take a percentage cut of whatever earnings you have. Over time, it can end up being quite a substantial amount of your earnings that go to these platforms. But again, if someone's just getting started and they're like, I don't even know where to start in terms of finding clients, I think Upwork and other platforms of the sort are a great way for you to understand, okay, these are what job postings look like. Maybe when I'm going around and I'm building up my one sheet for the first time, maybe this is what I include in terms of my scope of services, because this is what I'm seeing for these freelancing job postings. Like, you just start to be able to build that frame of reference through working on platforms like this. You also start to narrow in on the types of companies that are responding to you and are looking for your profile of talent. And you can also secure your first few clients this way, and you can understand their problem statements and understand the ways that they need help, maybe above and beyond what they initially reached out to you about. So in my instance, because I previously worked at Facebook, I know a lot about performance marketing. That's actually where I've spent the bulk of my career, in performance and paid social marketing. So what I signed up to do on Upwork was I created a profile as a Facebook ads buyer, basically.
Okay.
And then I ended up matching with companies that were, small direct-to-consumer e-commerce businesses looking for someone to run and optimize their Facebook campaigns. I came on to do that for them. But then in the process, I realized, well, there's all these other things that they actually need help with in order to make the ads work better. They might need help with their website. They might need help understanding how to build out collection pages in Shopify. But the beautiful thing was they'd given me access to their Shopify. So I could actually go in and start to develop the skill set of understanding, okay, well, if I were to do this on behalf of this client, could I do it on behalf of other clients? So now when I come to clients and I say, oh, I can run performance or digital marketing, I include in there, I can help you understand, the optimal Shopify setup to improve CVR. I can help you understand your unit economics, because now I know how to put reports in Shopify that show your costs as well as your sales. But I would have never known to offer those things had I not gotten in with some clients and understood the intricacies of their business and all the ways they needed help. So that's how I got my start. I got my start on Upwork, worked with a number of clients through there. And then after time, I just started to build out my own, services one sheet and reached out to clients directly. And I also got a lot of clients on a referral basis as well, which once you can get clients on a referral basis, that's the most ideal way to secure clients for sure.
I love that. It's something that it maps it out for people. I know I have conversations with people that have been in jobs for so long or been in industries for so long that they don't necessarily think about that as an option. There's a lot to unpack with it. One, some people will say, well, Upwork, it's like you said, saturation, but similar to where I talked about doing consulting work and working with the talent agencies where they would place me someplace, I got my hands-on experience by showing that I could actually do the work, and that's where I learned different platforms and different things. What you've described was going on to these platforms, and granted they are saturated, but it's a wealth of information there if you know what you're looking for. So if you're trying to figure out what kind of one pager do I need, go through and actually look and see what people have and look at how they're performing. Look at what they're saying their specialties are. Is it something that you can do? Or is it something where you have to work your way up to it? One of the things that I say is, in order to be able to start a business, you technically need three things. You need the budget, the experience or the expertise, and time. You can start with 2 out of the 3, but to be successful, you need to have all 3. So if you have the budget and the time, then you can get the experience. If you have the time and the experience, then you can always be able to get some work to be able to build up your budget to then go out and start a business. I just wanted to pause for a moment and really shine a light on Upwork, Fiverr. I don't necessarily like them as much because when I get on them, I get hit with a lot of different things, but I've also found some really great people on those platforms that were able to help me with projects and things like that. But it is a wealth of information on there. So if you don't know where to start there. One of the other things that I think that was really strong in what you said was not jumping with both feet. We both talked about it. I know all the things that I've learned over the years after jumping with both feet as an entrepreneur, there's a lot of things that I would have done differently. I went into starting my business knowing that I was going in to be a disruptor. And when I say disruptor, there's different types of entrepreneurs, but the disruptor is basically saying, yes, these things exist, but there's a better way to be able to go about it. And when you do that, you not only have to win over the audience, but you're competing against people that have systems in place. And they don't want you to be right, because if you're right and there is a better way to be able to do it, then they have to start looking at how they can change how they go about doing business. So in a way, you're taking money out of their pocket, not just as a competitor, but you're changing how things get done. And when you change the process, it's even more expensive than just taking a client. So I found that there is no HR in entrepreneurship. So if you're on the corporate side, you can go to HR and say, listen, this person's doing this, 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 and this. So can you get them to take a step back? Can you get them off my back? There is none of that in entrepreneurship. So there are people that over the years that I thought I was really, really good with, and we had a great relationship. And as I refined my services and got further into it, they started looking at me as a competitor. So you have to know what you're kind of getting yourself into. As a disruptor, I knew that there were going to be certain things, certain challenges that I had to face. If you know that you're going into it and you have risk and you don't have the confidence or the wherewithal to be able to weather that storm, then you may want to go in as in a simulator. Go in and don't rock the boat. Find a way to kind of slice out a piece of what already exists for yourself. And then you can start looking at how to be able to expand from there. So I think knowing what your surrounding circumstances are is just as important as trying to figure out what it is that you want to be able to do, because you can figure out what you want to be able to do. But if you don't understand what kind of battle you're going to be walking into, then you can set yourself up for failure. Thankfully, I've always been kind of that way. So, even when I was a kid, once I got tall enough to a certain extent, people say, oh, you have to play basketball. I'm like, so just because I'm tall, I have to play basketball? Now I'm going to show you that I can do things another way. So every time someone tried to put me in a box, just naturally, my thing was, I'm going to go do the opposite thing because I don't like that you try to put that limit on me. So I'm used to that battle that I have to have, but a lot of people that are going to be venturing out into entrepreneurship may not have that. And they may not have that understanding. One of the other things that I want to be able to speak to is your bravery and your confidence, because I think that's one of the biggest things that limit people when they're thinking about venturing out, when they're thinking about corporate portfolios, when they're thinking about their next steps. When you get walked into that room, it is a gut punch. All of a sudden, your world gets turned upside down. You're starting to think about all the responsibilities and things that you have to be able to see to. It can take away a certain level of confidence. And if you don't have that confidence is one of the main things to get you that next step and that next job. So how did you deal with that? How did you manage that? Because it's like you said, when it comes out of nowhere, it's just, wow, what do I do now?
Yeah. So in terms of the layoff, I will say I was in a really fortunate position. And I think this speaks to something that folks with full-time corporate jobs should also think about. Like, everybody says your network is your net worth, but I think especially in this job climate, like you said earlier, it really is. People are going to get jobs now through networking and through relationships and through, you should think of every customer interaction, partner interaction as effectively almost an interview. Any great client deliverable you produce is almost like a case study for you being able to maybe work with this person in another capacity later on. So I was very well connected, and still, I think I still am, but I was pretty well connected when I was at Facebook. And I actually had a really close friend who was an advisor to a startup, and they were actually looking to hire a vice president of customer success at that startup. When I was laid off, I kind of had, and they had kind of wanted me to join prior, but I told them, no, now is not the time. But I kept those relationships warm. So then when the layoff happened, they had that role and we kind of co-created it together. designing with me in mind. So I was in an incredibly fortunate position to be able to do that. But I think speaking more to having the confidence when I got to the point in my last startup that I was building where I realized I'd need to find work. Yeah, there is a point where you think to yourself, why me? Why would someone want to work with me? I think maybe that's why, to be completely frank with you, maybe that's why I went the Upwork route, because I didn't feel like I had the confidence at that stage to start reaching out to my network directly. I think too, there's also this shame associated with being a tech founder, but then also doing work on the side. It makes you look like, oh, Abby's startup must be failing if she's reaching out to do side gig work. Or if she's not all in on her business, what's the likelihood of success for this startup? So I kind of wanted to be a little covert about it. And I think that's a big reason I went to Upwork, because I was like, okay, then maybe I don't need to DM a lot of my former colleagues or friends of friends to understand if their brands need help with marketing. So that's another reason I took to Upwork first, because I think it preserved a little bit of my anonymity. I will say, and I think this is an important point to make too, going through Upwork and just venturing out into consulting in general, especially if you've had like a decade's plus worth of experience in corporate, you might find yourself doing work through consulting that feels a little more executional than what you were doing prior, right? Because you're now working with companies who don't have the resources. Like I was at the point in my career where I was used to coming in with a strategy, and then there'd be other folks on the team that could implement that strategy and deal with execution.
Great point.
When you're working directly with these companies and they're probably paying you to do the strategy and the execution, and can be sometimes a little bit of an existential experience, because you're thinking, oh, am I stepping back in my career by going back into this, kind of more executional capacity? But I think there's so much to be said for being hands-on keyboard and being intimately familiar with the day-to-day of what it takes to do this job is actually really powerful and helps you build a more resilient career too. Because what we're finding too is, I've experienced this at companies. Sometimes when you rise too far to the top, you can become a little bit obsolete because you don't understand the inner workings of how the job gets done. So I tried to look at it as, well, this is actually opportunistic for me, because I had worked at Facebook. I hadn't run a Facebook campaign in a really long time. When I got back to running Facebook campaigns for my clients, I realized I'd only been out of Facebook for like a year and a half at that point. So much had changed within Ads Manager. There was so much additional automation. There was all these different campaign types. And I thought to myself, well, this is actually really good, because if I want to continue to market myself as someone who's proficient in Facebook ads marketing, I need to know what the product is, right? To have this intimate familiarity with product. So I had to kind of reframe it. It wasn't so much that I wasn't confident. It was that I felt it was a humbling experience. And then it was something that I looked at as a learning opportunity, which is, I think, folks who are venturing out into their freelance journey should look at it like that. I think the other side of that I will say is it can be very difficult to maintain confidence as an entrepreneur. So one of the things I do encourage folks to do, and sometimes I've had to remind myself, is continue to, even if you're speaking with a client, right, and it feels like the deal is done and they're going to sign you on, continue to build your pipeline of potential prospects. Like never stop doing business development, never stop content marketing yourself, never stop just taking that call with that person that might need marketing help down the line, because whether it's an offer from a corporate giant or it's a contract offer from a small business, the deal isn't done till it's done. And the beauty of continuing to say yes to opportunities like that is it helps you build your confidence and it builds your ability to say no. And I know, Sean, you and I have talked about this before, where there might be a point in your portfolio career or your entrepreneurial journey where you feel like maybe money's tight and you feel like you just need to say yes to every prospective client that's coming in. And then you end up working with clients that like don't respect your time, or they're not sticking with some of the precedents that you set earlier on in terms of job scope. And if you don't have a lot of other things lined up, you might not feel like you have the agency or the confidence to push back on that client and say, this is out of scope or this isn't working. And so that I think what's really powerful in a way that you can build confidence over time is by just continuing to remain open to opportunities and not feeling like you ever need to rely on any particular deal to come through.
I love that. I will be clipping that because there are so many people that need to hear that and understand it. Now, we've talked about the professional side of it and just the confidence on that side, but there's also the emotional well-being. And I know we've had those conversations where you have to figure out how to be able to balance these things out, because now that means chances are you're relying on, if you have a partner, you're relying on that partner to kind of carry the weight for a little bit while you try to figure out your next move. I love what you said about Upwork as far as it also being something where you can build up your confidence. Let's not forget that it's also something, this is where people get their testimonials and things like that, because so often when people are starting out, nobody really wants to be the first person. It's something where if you can show proof of concept, if you can show that you've been doing different things and it's not a fluke, then it's something where you can start to have more of that conversation. I'm a lover of the process. So I have always wanted to learn enough about each part of the process so that if I ever ended up in that situation, I can say it's less of a step back and it's more of an opportunity to learn the full scope of what needs to get done. Because when you understand the full scope, if someone throws a curveball and they say, well, I actually need you to take on this role as well. When you're looking for a corporate, if you're trying to be on a corporate side, one of the things that I noticed was the larger corporations, they have a very specific job for you to do. And you know this, when you start working with the smaller boutiques and startups, you get to wear a lot of hats. So I've worked for the larger companies where they had a very specific job. And if you stepped outside of that job, you would actually almost get reprimanded, where they would say, no, 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 you're only supposed to be doing this. If you do that, then you're taking somebody else's job, or you're messing in the process that we have in place, the structure. But when it comes to the smaller jobs, you get to wear those different hats. And if you've had that experience, then it's something where it's to your advantage, because when you go out and you're on Upwork or something like that, you probably have a better understanding of more of the process because you've been involved in more of it. If you've never been exposed to that part, this is a great way for you to be able to gather that experience. There are a lot of people that get trained on platforms and things like that. They put it on their resume, they go to get a new job, and what you realize is they taught you how to be able to do that work on that platform for their job, the way that they do it. But the moment that you go into a new job, they have their own process. So where you're saying you're an expert in it, you might not be an expert in it. You're an expert in how to do it the way that the other company did. So all of these things kind of bring it back to understanding not just how to be able to do the job, but understanding the process enough to be able to say, well, it can be done different ways. Am I comfortable seeing it from different angles that allow me to be able to go out, and that can build your confidence up. So don't
Yeah.
just learn how to do something the way that they're telling you how to be able to do it. Look at the other ways that it can be used, and that will arm you for the things that may come up. There are some people that are going to be on the corporate side, still have their job and they're fine. And then what happens if you're not? You want to kind of prepare yourself for that. So I know we talked about it in the past where I want to be able to walk into a room and no matter who's in the room, I want to be able to hold a conversation with them. So when it was the advertising side, I knew that ad ops was going to be the ones that actually ran the sprints and put everything in motion. So I needed to learn how to be able to create like the line items. I needed to understand what went into their jobs because it made it easier for me to have those conversations. So this is a good time for people to start learning what the other departments do, how it aligns with what they're doing, because when you can understand that, if you step out on the Upwork, if you step out on the Fiverr, if you step out on your own, or you find yourself out on your own, you're more armed for being able to face this world than if you only know how to be able to do it that one way. So we've talked about some of the preventative measures. I'd like to talk about the insights and the impact. And I know you have taken steps to be able to help people that are doing portfolio careers to manage their calendars and manage how they're navigating working with different clients and projects and making sure that they can stay organized. Can you tell me a bit about what you created and what you have in place to be able to help people? Because we've talked about going into the career, but now let's talk about how to be able to manage it and be successful with it.
Yeah. Yep. Completely. So my current company, CalPal, was born of a big problem statement that came out of me having a portfolio career. And so for some context, I had talked about my co-founder and I previously had a startup. We were bootstrapped. We had not raised any capital. A big reason why we both ended up going out on our own and freelancing on the side. And while I was freelancing, I just started to recognize that I would have meetings thrown on my calendar for my freelancing clients, but then I would also have a completely separate calendar that was dedicated to my startup. And I would have one-on-ones there with my co-founder, or maybe I would have meetings with a prospective business partner. And because those two calendars weren't talking to each other, sometimes I would get double booked. And I would have all these little workaround hacks whereby, maybe I'd put blocking events on my personal calendar to account for where I was busy in my startup. But then if my startup event moved, I'd have to go and I'd have to move that blocking event on my personal calendar. And so I was just completely, overwhelmed because I had all these, like at any point in time, looking at one calendar wasn't a true accurate representation of my availability. Another thing that was happening too was even if I didn't have conflicting meetings, people were throwing things on both calendars. And I just felt like my time kept getting accounted for in all these unanticipated ways. As a business owner, as a startup founder, in addition to being client facing and partner facing, you also have to have time to be able to sit and do the heads down work, do that deep work.
Yes.
And if meetings are just being thrown on your calendar left and right, you really don't create space for that. So I was having these problem statements, but I figured surely there must be a solution out there for people like me. I just must not have happened upon it yet. And what you realize in retrospect is with all of the targeted advertising there is out there, if there's a solution for people like me, I would have seen it. I would have seen it on YouTube, Facebook, Google Display Network, search. I would have come across it. I wouldn't have to look hard. But it's funny because I just kind of kept this to myself. Well, one day my co-founder was commiserating with me because he as well was kind of getting double booked on meetings. And he's someone who's like very well researched, very diligent. Anytime there's a product gap or gap in the market for a solution, he's already done extensive research to see if there's something else out there. And he hadn't happened upon anything either. Not for people like us who are like full-time independent professionals, right? There's time management and calendar management solutions for folks who work in corporate businesses with cross-functional teams, but not for folks who are doing this kind of like freelancing, side gig type work. With multiple clients, being accountable to multiple clients is key. So what we did was we looked at each other and we figured, okay, well, do we do the startup-y thing and build the tool that we need for ourselves? And that was kind of the inception point of CalPal, which is a time and calendar management solution for full-time independent professionals juggling multiple calendars. And again, the reason this is so key is because, you're going to be accountable to multiple clients. You want to make sure you're not dropping the ball on meetings. But I think for me, an even more important thing and something that we're building out within CalPal right now, which is really exciting, is we're actually building in time tracking analytics. So via CalPal, whether it be through your meetings or your tasks, we have a lens into where your time is going across all of the calendars that you sync up with CalPal. And the thing that's great about that is one of my biggest gripes as a freelancer is, and I think you mentioned this too, Sean, sometimes you take on a client and even though they're paying you the least, they're expecting the most. And you never know how demanding a client's going to be until you work with them. So for me, a big thing is I want to make sure that I'm not over-indexing my time on areas that aren't giving value back to me. And I know what I charge my clients on a retainer basis, but what does that break down to in terms of effective hourly rate? Like if a client's, giving me a certain amount of money per month, but I'm spending 3 times as long on this client as I am another client who's paying me maybe a little bit less, maybe I should call back some of my hours that I'm working on the demanding client with. And so I really wanted something that would help me visualize where my time was going and help me better optimize my time. Because when you have a portfolio career, time optimization is key, right?
Everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. There's so much within that. One, there are a lot of solopreneurs out there that are working with multiple clients and trying to figure out how to manage their schedule, networking, and all the other things that come with being able to run a business. And it kind of goes back to what we were saying with, jumping in with both feet. These are all things that are part of that learning curve. I was great at being able to project manage, program manage. I knew how to do a lot of things, but what I didn't realize was the owner aspect of it. So where I was being able to rise up the ranks on the corporate side and manage projects and all the rest of that, I was focused on the projects. I was able to focus on the client, and that's what allowed me to be good at it. Once I stepped out into entrepreneurship, then I had to realize, okay, that's just one part of the job. The other part of the job is you still have to be the business owner. And you covered that to be able to say, well, you still have to continue to network. You still have to fill that pipeline. So yes, you have to do the work, but then you still have to make sure that you have something out there where there was a sales team on the corporate side. I am not a salesperson. I can sell because I have done sales, but I'm not a salesperson. I'm solution orientated. So I'm more focused on how do we get you the results and things that you need as opposed to trying to sell you on an idea. So there are so many different aspects of what you're addressing with CalPal. It's allowing people to be able to manage their schedule. So you can be that business owner, but then you can also run the business. It's being able to address how to be able to structure these things, because I can tell you this, one of the things that I learned is I used to get on the Zoom calls and network and have that Zoom background where it had your contact information. And then I started having people fill in my booking calendar that I didn't even know who they were. And then I said, okay, well, I have to put in some questions to qualify them. And then they wouldn't even answer those properly. So then I would either have to reach out to them or get on the call and say, okay, I need you to catch me up on why you wanted to be able to have this call. Time management and being efficient with your time is so important when you're venturing out, especially for portfolio careers or just running your business in general. So I'm a big fan of CalPal, and I am someone that will absolutely be looking at it as a resource because I run into these things all the time. It's something that I think no matter where you are in your business journey stage, you have to either forecast what kind of issues you may run into, or you have to problem solve once they become something. So I'm a big fan of taking preventative measures and knowing what reactionary solutions you need to have in place. And this solves both.
Yeah.
So I love what you're putting out there.
And just to build on that, in addition to having reactionary measures, one thing we're building as well is something a bit more proactive. So with the insights we're going to have into how you're spending your time, we have this mission of being able to proactively make sure you're not overbooking yourself or not overcommitting yourself in certain areas. So within CalPal, we're building up this functionality of having budgets, basically, where you can tell the system, I only want to spend X amount of hours on this client per week, let's say. And then the system can, over time, start to accrue how much time you're spending on client meetings that are tagged to this client, the tasks that are tagged to this client. And then it can basically alert you if you're starting to over-index working with that client. Down the line, we're also going to be able to have booking links that dynamically adjust your availability based on how much time you've already dedicated to a client within a given amount of time. So if you say, hey, in a given week, I only want to spend 4 hours on a client, and it's halfway through the week and you've already spent 3 hours and 30 minutes. If that
Nice.
client tries to use your booking link to book an hour-long meeting with you, your first availability is going to be the Monday of the following week, because an hour-long meeting with that client in the current week would put you over your hourly 4-hour allocation for that client. So these are the things we're thinking of, because in the example you just gave, you had to get on a call with the client to further vet and qualify whether it was a worthwhile conversation. Well, that's actually not a good use of your time. So how can we make sure that we automate that away as well?
I love it. I keep saying I love it, but I genuinely do. One of the things that really stood out is you're thinking through, you're getting out ahead of issues that could come up. And then it also goes back to this actually helps you identify your ideal client, your ideal customer, because you may start out with a broader scope and say, okay, well, I'm going to fill the pipeline and take in as many jobs as I want. But as you progress, you're supposed to, similar like with paid advertising. If you do paid advertising, I'm a stickler of you should be learning something so that you can have that conversation for free. I think your calendar is something that will allow you to be able to identify who your ideal customer is. When you start looking at how much time you're spending with someone.
Yeah.
From a running a business standpoint, you focus on getting the job done. From owning a business, you have to start looking at efficiency. What allows me to be able to generate the same amount of money, but within less time, because it frees up time for me to be able to take on more projects and do other things. And you're addressing that and so many other things in what you're doing. So I love it. I would love to be able to get an idea of where are you in the process with these things? Is it something that's available now, or is it something where, because I mean, it's, you know how it goes. We hear about these great things and it's like, okay, well, I want it. How do I get it? Is this something that's out now? Is this something that people can get? If it is, I'll definitely drop it in the links so people can start doing their research and investing in it.
Yeah. So you're meeting us at a really interesting point. We are about to launch, basically, we're about to come out of beta, in essence. We're about to start charging for the application. But the nice thing is there will be a forever free plan for folks. So based on the complexity of your needs as a full-time independent professional, or even someone who's just getting started in solopreneurship, it kind of, the pricing varies based on the complexity of your needs. So by the time this comes out, we will be out of beta. You can sign up to CalPal by going to getcalpal, GetCalpal.com. And you can sign up for your monthly subscription there. And I think it's a great, especially as we're speaking to those folks that might just be dipping their toes into the waters of freelancing, it might be a great option for you. Maybe you only have one calendar or two calendars that you want to synchronize across. For you, the Forever Free plan will be great. But then over time, as your business starts to mature, you take on more clients, your needs get more complex. There's other tiered pricing models that might better meet your needs. Honestly, we have a number of task integrations as well that we're working on. I know a lot of independent professionals are using things like Asana, ClickUp. So we're working to pull in those systems too, because another great thing about CalPal is you can think of it as the one centralized location for all of your time and task management. That's really what we're aiming to be. But
Very
now that
cool.
we've added in this analytics as well, it's something that also helps you audit how you're spending your time. So all that to say, the tool will be out of beta in general release probably by the time this episode is recorded, and you can sign up at getcalpal.com.
Okay, clipping that as well. And I want to make sure that I put the links and everything within the post or descriptions, because we're not just talking about the people that are already out there. We're talking about the people that might find themselves in that situation. Yeah. Someone that may be getting walked into a room, unfortunately, either just had it happen or it may be coming up. And when your world gets turned upside down, you start looking for the one or the few things that you can grab onto to kind of get your bearings. And this is something that will alleviate a lot of the extra things that you have to come up with. If you know that you're going to have something in place that's going to allow you to start venturing out into consulting, freelance, portfolio careers, put as many things in place as you can initially so that you don't have to worry about those things as you start to learn what you need to learn. The learning curve is there no matter how seasoned you are. Like I said, program manager, project manager, solutions architect, I can run down a lot of different titles that I've had. As much as it prepared me for running the business. It didn't prepare me for owning the business. And it gave me a whole new level of respect for the business owners, because now I understand some of the decisions that they had to make and the tough calls that they had to make. There's a lot to it. Yeah. And it's the more you can kind of use these things to be able to put a buffer in place that allows you to be able to say, well, I don't have to worry about that. So now that can allow me to focus on this. The further you can get down the road before whatever other shoe might be out there can drop, and you will put yourself in a position where you're in better standing. But I can tell you, and I'm sure you can speak to it as well, but when you first start your business or you venture out into that world, you can blow through a lot of money figuring things out. You can burn through the money trying to find apps and tools that don't necessarily align with what you want. They've got shiny features and it sounds nice, but if you don't have someone to guide you and say, based on what it is that you're trying to get done, this is the one that's going to be the best for you, you could burn through a lot of money. And when you get to the other side of it and you start thinking about how much money you've burnt through, it's a real game changer. It's something that I wanted to make sure that we talked about CalPal, because this alleviates a lot of that. Like, you don't have to worry about some of it. You don't have to say, well, this program or this tool is something that I know I should probably use, but it's well beyond my understanding of how to be able to use it. So having those kind of integrations, having things that cover different platforms and cover different calendars is going to be really, really important.
And I would say too, just to touch on that point, and I know, Sean, you and I have talked about this a lot, but I would be remiss not to mention it here. For anybody who's building a business, whether it's a service-based business or it's a tech business, there is this fallacy that you need to be all in on your business in order for it to be successful. And I'm here to say that sentiment is laden with privilege. There's so many folks who cannot afford to stop everything else, stop all other revenue streams to work on building the thing. There's a number of folks who do have the ability to do that. These are folks with a lot of generational wealth. Maybe they have a very high earning partner. Maybe they worked really great corporate jobs before and they have amassed crazy savings. But for the rest of us, it is just not a financial viability to cut off all other sources of income to focus on building your business. I am of the opinion that, if you want to build something and you also want to build something from a place of abundance and not a place of fear and feeling like you're operating from a place of scarcity, the best way to do that is to just be doing something. Maybe you're not going to be matching what you were making at your previous job, but the ability to have your basic needs met while you're building something else is so, so powerful. And for many of us, it's not going to come in the forms of going through savings or running through venture dollars. It's going to come in the form of you picking up these different side streams of income. So again, whether this is something that you want to build, you want to build a full-time consulting business for yourself, or you're looking to build a different type of business, but freelancing and side gig work is something that gets you to where you want to be. Both forms of those are completely acceptable. And I think just, important for folks to keep that in mind.
Very, very important. I think it's something that we've discussed over time in different conversations. It is a fallacy that you can just jump into it and start a business. I just finished talking about how much money was spent. I don't even like to think about the number, but I know I spent thousands and thousands of dollars getting the business up and running. One of the things that I know, it took me finding someone that could explain it to me better, that I was paying for a lot of leads, paying for lead sites and things like that, where they would send me people, but they were sending the leads to all kind of other people as well. So I was getting access to audiences, but I was paying to have a competition that I wasn't armed to be able to compete in properly. And it took me taking a step back and realizing, well, I actually have to work on my business before I can enter into that arena, because I can't have the conversations that they're having. I would get like a lead here and there, but it wasn't the same as what they would be able to draw in, because the conversation would be, well, they offered more features, or they have a bigger team. There were different things that I needed to be able to figure out how to address the objections that I would run into. And I think starting with, a side hustle or something where you can kind of ease into it more, it starts to give you the questions that you need to be able to answer. And once you can start to figure out those questions and you can figure out the best approach, then it puts you in a position where you can win more business. So I'm a big believer in crawl, walk, run. Don't necessarily just jump into it, because there are people that, I talk to so many people, they'll jump into saying that they want to start a business. I get calls all the time where people say, well, I want to do this. And I have to have an honest conversation and say, listen, I could take your money, but I'm not going to take your money, because based on what you've laid out for me, you're not there yet. And what I can tell you is I can help you get the foundation that you need so that you can do the things that you want to be able to do. But that's what you would be paying me for. Everything else will come after that. But if you just start with where you're trying to go, there are so many businesses that have to do rebrands and things like that because they didn't put the foundation in place. And then once they got out there and they were in the market, then they had to worry about their reputation and everything else with credibility. And they weren't built for the scale that they wanted to be able to have. They weren't built to compete with people that were more established. Take the time to figure some of these things out, get it right. So then this way, when you want to have those conversations, you can, and you can do it from a place of confidence as opposed to scarcity and just trying to figure out how you're going to be able to generate revenue, because people can smell desperation on you. And some people will avoid you because of it, and some people will seek you out because of it. And that goes back to why CalPal is going to be important, because if you know that you're spending too much time on a client and it doesn't align with how much you're getting paid, that's going to be one of those telltale signs that you need to start addressing what kind of clients do you have, what kind of onboarding do you have, what kind of process do you have in place to make sure that you can balance those things out, because you will spend a lot more time going out. And you talked about it, for the first year or so, at least for some startups, you don't really see any of that money. So if you know you have more going out than you have coming in, you have to have a way to be able to balance that out.
Completely. Yeah. And again, I think it's also, this whole notion of balance too. Like, I think it's a really tricky one, because when we first started with CalPal, we were like, oh, are we helping with work-life balance? And it's like, no, I think that even within your portfolio of business, there's no such thing as having it balanced. It's having, your time commensurate with the value you're getting back from investing that time. So it's more like about proper work-life integration, and also a proper integration within your business, just to make sure proportionally your time is going to things that are, paying you commensurate with that time. So yeah, completely on board.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't think, I love the term work-life balance. I don't know that it's something that I will achieve. It's one of those things that's out there. It's an urban legend of, well, you'll always be able to balance it out. I think you have to be very intentional about the way that you go about doing it. And it's hard to get those intentions and put the things in place without knowing what you have to have in place. So when you're starting out, work-life balance is probably not going to be something that's a reality, unless you're doing something where it's more of a side hustle and you can say, well, I'm only going to allot this much time to it. If you jump with both feet, you are fully in it, and you will not be able to kind of rein that back in for a little while. And we talked about family and the support system. Some people have it, some people don't. For those that have it, you have to make sure that everybody around you understands what you're getting yourself into. So again, that's another reason why we both agree. I think you have to be measured in your approach of entering into entrepreneurship, and corporate portfolio is something that allows you to be able to do that, because you can say, okay, well, I'm able to do this much. I figured this part out. Now I can take on extra clients, or now I can take on a different type of project. And it allows you to be able to kind of measure your time and still check in with the family and things like that to make sure you're not putting so much on them while you're trying to figure out what you're doing. But it also gives you some of the wins so that you can go back and say, listen, you left for work, and when you came back, I wasn't still sitting on the couch and doing the same things that I was doing when you left. Here's the things that I was able to do. So you can map things out. You can have more where you can show people that you are making that extra effort, because at the end of the day, I'm old school. Every time I have someone on as a guest, or I have conversations with someone, I always want to make sure that they know that I value their time. So I may come back to them and say, you know what, when we were having the conversation, you said this, here's what I did with it. Because that makes me feel justified in being able to ask for their time again. I can't tell you how many times I've spoken with people and they do the start and stop, or they don't even start, and then they want to come back and get more of your time. And my thing is, now I'm aware of my time.
Yeah.
I can't give you that time if you don't do anything with it. So be mindful of that part as well. Corporate portfolio and easing into it allows you to be able to justify the time and the insights that you may be asking someone for. Because in my experience, if you ask smart questions, people will give you the answer for free. But if they realize you're so early in the process that they're going to have to walk you through every single step, then that's where people need to start charging you for their time, because they know all the things that you don't know and that they're going to have to walk you through. And especially with early stage businesses, the expectations are higher than their revenue as far as what they're bringing in for you. So I know when I talk to people that are working with latter stage businesses, seasoned businesses, they're like, I don't understand how you work with early stage businesses. Like, you're doing way more work than you would have to do, and you can make more with the seasoned businesses. Thing is, because nobody told me some of the things that I needed to know. And if I can help avoid that for someone else, then it's worth it for me. And as long as I put the things in place necessary to protect me in the situation, it's okay. I'll take a hit every now and then. I'm saying you can do exactly what it is that you want to be able to do. But if you do it that way, here's some of the things that you're going to run into. So it's forecasting, it's the cautionary tales, it's all the different things that you have to tell people. And then a lot of times they end up seeing it later and coming back and going, oh my God, you were right. So it's take your time to figure it out. Take your time to make sure that it aligns with what your surrounding circumstances are, because if you do that, then you'll be in a much better position to see the forest for the trees and know what you're getting yourself into. I will segue into one thing. We're talking about corporate portfolios. We're talking about venturing out. We're talking about a lot of layoffs and different things like that. We've both been through it. We've both bounced back from it. And we are seeing a lot of people heading out into this. And it's just totally new territory. It's like you said, some people have had that experience before and they kind of know how to manage it. And then there's the people that have never been down that path. I have conversations with both, and it is two completely different conversations. Can we talk about one thing for the people that have been in a position and one thing for the people that haven't? Is there any advice that you would give them to kind of help them figure out how to get the weight of the world off their shoulders in these moments?
Yeah. I would say, so starting with the people who haven't been through it, I would just say, based on my experience, take a listener first approach when you're talking to your friends and they're commiserating with you about, losing their job. Don't try to reassure them that, you heard this person got a job, or, don't worry, things will turn around, because what inherently that can feel like is it's incredibly invalidating to someone who's feeling like, they're entering this like red sea of a job market and they're getting rejections left and right. Even if you have been laid off before, I think everybody's experience is so unique to them. So when you're trying to support your friends or your family members who've been laid off, just please take a listener first approach. And it's ask more questions versus giving advice. Ask, how can I help? How can I support? Rather than proactively like sending them job postings or telling them they should get in touch with this person, because I feel like sometimes what that can feel like as someone who's looking for a job or figuring out next steps, it can feel as though you're not doing the right thing or you're not doing enough.
Absolutely.
And as somebody who, again, like when you get laid off from a company, it feels like rejection. And the last thing you want is to feel continually rejected by the people in your life who you want to stay very close to. So please take a listener first approach when it comes to your friends who've gone through a layoff. For folks who have gone through a recent layoff, first of all, if anybody wants to reach out to me personally, like I would love nothing more than to talk to you and just be kind of a pillar of support as someone who has gone through it. So please definitely get in touch. But beyond that, I would say, yeah, just kind of thinking through what are ways that you can. One of the things I would say, actually, and this is maybe a little bit of controversial advice, is I would say the first thing you should do as somebody who's been laid off is not just all of a sudden go and apply to jobs. Especially if you're going to do like LinkedIn Easy Apply. I have been
Yes.
in previous job searching eras where it's really just been a numbers game. And so long as you put out enough applications, you would get enough bites. That's not the case now. We know this to be true. You need to have like 115% of the qualifications to be even considered for a role. And a lot of these roles are being vetted through by applicant tracking systems. So if you don't have a connection at the company, even if you are more than qualified, you're probably not even going to get on the phone. And again, like I said before, you just got rejected. It can feel like you just got rejected by a company. You are not in a place to start getting rejected again by countless other companies. And the reason that's so important is because you want to make sure that you are preserving and rebuilding your confidence, like we talked about before. So do what you can to rebuild your confidence first and foremost as you're venturing into this, job market. Think about ways that you can pick up streams of income. Maybe they're not full-time corporate jobs, but find ways that you can make money. I think it's really important to remind yourself that you have services that people are willing to pay for and for you to just know your worth over time. So find ways to make money, whether it's signing up for one of these freelancer sites or, talking to friends of family who might be business owners who are looking for certain types of consultation. Just get creative as well. Like I know a lot of folks who do Rover and house sitting as well. It's a great way to almost have passive income while you're also maybe doing your job search. Just think of ways of accruing different revenue streams. And then I really, really am a big advocate of fractional and freelance work because I know so many job searchers as of late have gotten their full-time roles because they were contracting or freelancing for companies. And then those companies got to the point where they could hire folks as full-time employees. And their first hire was someone who was contracting for them prior. So I think contracting, freelancing is actually a great way to almost quote unquote interview with these companies. And it makes sense for the companies to do that because it's a much lower risk way of them to vet talent and then bring someone on board once they know that they can already demonstrate they bring a ton of value. So I would get into the freelance fractional portfolio career stint as soon as possible. But I think first and foremost, just make sure you're doing things and you're taking on opportunities that help you build back up that confidence.
I know I keep saying it, but I love that. I have a lot of love for you, but every conversation just adds to the reasons that I've got a lot of love for you. It is a lengthy, lengthy list of reasons why I think you're awesome. And that response just summed up a lot of it. Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. I think when you've been gut punched, you have to kind of get your footing. Because if your world is turned upside down, you may even go home and then have to hear from people in your personal life where it's like, not again, or whatever it is, you're dreading the whole situation. Get your confidence back, get some quick wins, take a beat, get your breath, get your footing, figure out what's going on around you and what you need to put, what you need to prioritize over what can take a minute for you to be able to get that set. So many things in what you just said that I really, really hope that people can take away from it and actually put into practice because I've been there. I've been the first time it ever happened. It just rocked my world. And then for the times where I could see it coming, and what I learned was I'm going to negotiate my exit before you even start talking about having an exit. Let's put together an exit package. And I find it hilarious because in some cases I've left some places where on the back end I've had people say, "Oh, well, you got fired." No. I started looking at the situation and I didn't like what I was seeing. So I said, I would rather do it on my terms. And let's put together a package that I know was going to allow me to have that range, that runway that you just talked about. And then it gives me enough time to figure out what I want to be able to do. So I'm going to add that as a little extra part of, if you start to feel that you're in a situation and you see things that are coming up and you see the warning signs, don't just ignore the warning signs. Start putting some of those things in place that allow you to be able to kind of cushion your fall a bit,
Yeah.
and make sure that you can put those things in place.
Or I'll say, if it's not, again, if you're not in a place to leave a job without having another one, while you're seeing things kind of go in a precarious direction with your current company, on the side, start picking up consulting work. Just start entertaining conversations with folks in your network, like things that in earnest you probably moving forward should always be doing, even if you have a corporate job. But start laying the foundations outside of that job while you're still at that job, because I just want to reiterate that it is not a financial viability for a lot of folks right now to quit a job with nothing else coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I was going to ask you about the win within, but I think you just covered so much of it from different angles that I don't want to mess in anything that you just said, because that was a mic drop moment, and I don't want to pull away from it by distracting anyone with any other questions. I will be clipping that as well. I want to make sure that people have that so that they can hear it. And a lot of times what happens is people will hear something in a moment and it may not register with them because they're not in a place where either they can hear it or they're experiencing it. What I want is to make sure that people have an opportunity to be able to come back and be able to hear it when it matters the most, and they can do something with that information. So I will leave it here, but I will also say I would love to have you come back, because every time I have a conversation with you, I find more and more things to be able to talk about. And I think there's value in everything that you're doing, and you're a fascinating person. So I know if I feel that way, there are going to be more people that would love to be able to learn more about you. So if possible, I would love to have you back, but I'm going to stop it here and just say thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I appreciate you and the difference that you're making. I got introduced because you have your Marginalized podcast, and that stood out to me because who's talking about marginalized people? I know I said I wouldn't go into anything else, but I did want to give a shout out to your podcast and some of the extra things that you have out there, because you're not someone that's just talking about it. You're someone that's actually out there making a difference on multiple levels. So I will tag the podcast in the description and everything as well, because people need to hear that, because you're bringing people in to be able to walk them through some of the things that we covered. And why not don't just take the lessons here, take all the lessons that you're putting together for people to be able to do something with across the board, because when your world is turned upside down, you need all the insights, advice, and empathy that you can get, because you're not going to get it from a lot of places.
Yeah, really appreciate that. Yeah, thanks so much, Sean. Yeah, happy to come back on whenever.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay, well, I will call it here and just say like, share, and subscribe. I will be sharing clips. I will be trying to get back on Abby's schedule, most likely through CalPal, and we will do this again. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope everyone gets something from it, because I know I certainly did.
Awesome. Thanks again.
We'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in to the Strategic Thinkers podcast. Remember, when you can make the inconvenient convenient, people are willing to pay you for the experience. The better the experience, the more they'll not only pay you, but help others pay you. Serving as brand champions. My name is Sean Atkinson, and I'm wishing you well on your journey to your definition of success. If you find this podcast interesting, helpful, worth the listen, like, share, and subscribe. Leave a positive review so people know to check it out, and I'll see you next time.